Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at part 32 of the Hercules story from Ritchie's Fabulae Faciles. Now this part is called Hercules Discovers the Thief. And if you remember the story so far, Hercules has been trying to get the oxen back. The oxen of Geryon is his 10th labor. He's been in northern Italy, the Alps, all these things. And the last thing that happened is after he made it over the Alps and he's in Italy, Cacus the monster steals a couple of the oxen and Hercules needs it back. So we're picking up the story here where he's about to uncover that some of the oxen are missing and he's going to go to try to find them. Okay. Before we dive in, like I always tell you in these videos, the best way to approach it, I would say, is to take a minute and learn the vocabulary first, right? So if you can look through the story and write down a list or find one somewhere, there's a bunch of places you can find it. Just knowing the words is kind of the key. It's very hard to read this without knowing what the words mean. So I'd always start there. The next thing you want to do is try the read and reread method, right? I've said this before, but you want to read through the story once. Don't worry about whether or not you can translate the whole thing. Write down any problem areas you have. It might be vocab, grammar, whatever it is. Then when you're done with the first read, look up those problems. So if it's vocab, it's very easy. You just look up in the dictionary and you'll be able to figure it out. If it's grammar, it might be a little trickier, but still you can try to figure out, like, what am I looking at here? Okay. Then you go back, you read the story again. And on that second, third, fourth time, as many times as it takes you, it will get easier. And eventually you're trying to hit a point where you can read the story and understand it without having to look up all the words or spend a ton of time translating in your head. That's a good sign that you actually understand the story. Okay. The other thing I would recommend, read the story aloud. If you're a student, try to find a classmate, someone you can read it to so you can work on your speaking, your pronunciation. And if they can read it back to you, that'll bring it to life and let you work on your listening skills. Okay. You always want to treat it like a language. You don't want to just translate Latin in your head. You can do it that way, but it's much easier if you bring it to life and actually speak it and hear it and use it for the language that it is. Okay. So at this point, if you haven't tried, working through the story on your own, take a minute and go read it on your own, right? Try the read and reread method. You want to continue the video when you feel like you're at a point where you've already done it and you feel really good about your translation, your ability to understand it. And then if what you did comes pretty close, match it up with mine. It doesn't have to be exact. Not to say mine is perfect, but at least it'll give you a sense that you're on the right track. Okay. If you hear anything in my translation that's completely different from yours, you might want to pause and see kind of where you're going off the rails a little bit. Okay, so let's dive in now. The story starts like this, or the chapter starts like this, rather. You have postero die, simul atque e somno excitatus est, Hercules furtim animad vertit, et boes amisos omnibus locis quaereba. Okay, so postero die just means like on the following day, okay? So on the following day, the next day, right? Because remember, Cacus steals the ox when Herc is asleep. So on the following day, he was excitatus est. He was kind of awakened from sleep, a somno, right? So meaning Hercules was woken up. Okay. Then you have Hercules animad vertit, right? He kind of realized. It literally means like turned his mind, but he realized the furtum, the theft. And the simul atque, you might even want to translate it as soon as. It literally means something like at the same time as, or as the same time as, but you could say as soon as. So if you put it together, right, as soon as he had woken up from sleep, Hercules, animad vertit, right, he literally turned his mind, like I said, or noticed, you might say, the theft. So he realizes that his oxen are gone. And quaerebat, he was seeking the boes amisos. The amisos there is your participle, right? So it's the oxen. Then you have the perfect passive participle. Having been lost is kind of one way to put it together, right? It's the fourth principal part of amito amitre, which means to lose. So you could say he was looking for the lost oxen. That's kind of one way to do it. Omnibus locis in all places, right? So he's looking everywhere for his lost oxen. Then it continues, and you have host tamen nusquam reperire poterat non modo quod loci naturam ignorabat, sed quod vestigiis falsis deceptus est. Okay, so however, the nusquam here means like nowhere, right? So he was able to reperire, right? So the poterat, he was able. The reperire here means like to find, right? So it's just a complementary infinitive. He was able to find them, hosts, meaning the oxen, right? The boes. He was able to find them nowhere. Okay, so however, he was able to find them nowhere. So he doesn't see them. Okay, and there's a couple reasons why. You have non modo, so not only because, quote, ignorabat, he was literally something like he was ignorant or unknowing, you might say, of the nature of the place, right? Naturam loci. So he doesn't know The nature of the place, again, it means like the geography, basically, right? So he doesn't know where he is kind of the idea. The said means like but also, right? They're kind of going together, the correlatives, right? Not only, but also because, right? He was unable to find him because they kept assessed. He was deceived. You have the perfect passive there. He was deceived by the vestigiis falsis, by the false footprints, right? Or tracks. And what that's referencing is, remember we said Cacus walked the oxen backwards, so it looked like they were going one way when in reality they were going the other. So Hercules is just confused, right? He can't follow the tracks. Okay. Then you have tandem cum magnam partem diei frustra consubsisset cum reliquis bobis progredi constituet. Okay, so finally or at last, you have a cum clause here. So you're saying when, okay? So when he had, so when he had, consubsisset is the perfect there, the subjunctive going with the cum clause. So when he had consumed, you might say, the magnum partem, the greater part or a big part of the day, dae, and he had done this in vain, frustra. So it almost means like when he had spent is kind of a good way to do consumere there. So when he had spent the large part of the day in vain, meaning he can't find it, he decided to progredi. So progredi here is the infinitive. It's the deponent infinitive of progredior. So he decided to depart, or to like set out, you might say, is another way to do it. But to depart, now the cum here is not a cum clause. It means with, right? You can tell because it has the ablatives going with it. So it's just a preposition saying with the reliquis bobus, right? With the rest of the oxen. Now, bobus is a little bit confusing. The bobus here is actually the ablative of bos, right? Boas. It's spelled a little bit differently. This one, I won't lie. This one I found in a commentary because even at first for me, I was like, wait, what's happening here? But it's referring back to the boes. Okay, so with the rest of the oxen. So he wastes a lot of the day and he decides to go back just to leave with the rest of the oxen. He kind of gives up. Okay. Then you have dum proficisci parat unus e bobus quos secum habuit rather mugire coipet. So, but, right, so he's about to leave, but while he's preparing, right, parat, he's preparing proficisci to depart. Okay, so while he's, and again, the proficisci is a deponent infinitive, again, of proficiscor. Okay, it's another sort of departure word. So while he's preparing to depart, right, meaning to get ready, unus, one of the bobus, right, of the oxen, okay? One of the oxen, and then you have the relative clause here. So one of the oxen, which he had, all right, habuit, with him, right, secum, meaning not one of the ones he lost, but one of the ones which he has with him. One of the oxen, coipet mugire, it began to literally to moo, right? So mugire is a great verb in Latin, mugio, mugire. It's that a verb representing the sound that cows make, right? So mooing is literally what it means. So one of his cows, oxen, just starts to moo, right, to make noise, okay? And this is the red flag to Herc that something is wrong, okay? Then you continue. You have subito ei qui in spelunca inclusi erant, mugitem rediderant, et hoc modo Herculem certiorem fecerant rather, quote in loco celati essent. So suddenly, those who, and again, maybe it's which, it's talking about the oxen, but the a here is talking about the oxen who are not there, right? The ones that Cacus stole. So those oxen who or which inclusierant had been hidden in spelunca, in the cave, right? So the ones that were kind of taken away there is the idea. And again, includere means to like hide, close, maybe close is a better word, had been closed off in the cave, right? They rediderant, they returned the mugitum, the mooing, I guess you'd say, the sound, right? So they returned the moo. Okay, so Herc's cows start mooing, and then all of a sudden he hears this mooing coming from a cave, right? Then you have et hoc modo. So in this way, fecerant, they made, meaning the cows mooing, they made Hercules certiorum, right? They made him more certain, right? This is a word we've seen before that means he like understood what was going on. But literally, they made him more certain in which location, right? Quo in loco, in which place, you might say, celati essent, they were hidden. Right. So that last part is cello, right? Celare, to hide or to conceal. So it's saying in this way, you have that relative there. this is how Herc finds out where the oxen are, right? Because his cows or his oxen start mooing. The ones who are hidden return the moo. Herc hears it, and now he knows where his missing oxen are. Okay. Then you have ille there, and again, if you get stuck with any of that, the only tricky part really there is the certiorum fecerat, right? They made more certain, right? This is sort of a double accusative. It means he's informed, right? It's kind of the idea. That quo in loco calati, again, you have the pluperfect passive subjunctive there. It's sort of, I guess, like an indirect question kind of happening there, but it's just saying where they are, right? And that's what you're looking at. So then you end with this. You have ille vehementer erratus ad spaluncam quam celerime se contulit ut praedam reciperet. So, and actually there's one more part. This is in the end, but almost the end of it, okay? So ille, he, right? The vehementer means like, it can mean like violently, it means like strongly. So erratus, so he was strongly angry, right? Is kind of the idea. So angry Herc, right? That's describing him. He se contulit, so he literally carried himself. He hustled is kind of the idea, but he carried himself quickly, very quickly. Celerime is a superlative, so the most quickly, right? To the spelunca, right, to the cave, right? So he runs off. He hears, and sorry, the quam there is quam celerime. So you're saying he carried himself to the cave as quickly as possible is how you translate that. Remember, when you have quam plus a superlative, you say as something as possible, right? Celerime here is the superlative adverb. So he ran as quickly as possible to the cave, right? Then you have ut praedam reciperet, so that, right? You're setting up a purpose clause so that he might reciperet, he might return or get back, you might even say, or take back. Maybe it's a good way to do it. Take back the praedam, right? His plunder, his spoils. It's talking about the cows. The reason we use praedam is because it's the loot he got from Geryon, right? His prize is kind of the idea. So Herc runs off to the cave and he's trying to get his cows back. But we end on this sort of cliffhanger, if you want to call it that. He actually can't get into the cave. And it says why in the last line. You have at kakos saxum ingens ita de yecerat ut aditus speluncae omnino obstrueretur. There we go, right? So, but Cacus, remember the monster that stole it, right? Cacus de yecerat, geez, even I'm stumbling there, right? De yecerat, there we go. He had thrown, right? So this is the verb to deikio means to like throw down. It's from yakio, the verb throwing, but the de means like down. So he had thrown down a saxum ingens, a huge stone or boulder is kind of the idea, right? So he tries to get into the cave, but he can't because Cacus threw down a boulder. So that you have the ut obstrueretur there. You have another purpose clause, okay? So he threw down this boulder so that the aditus speluncae, right? So the aditus there is sort of the entrance, you might say. The entrance of the cave might be obstructed, right? Is kind of how you'd want to do obstrure, right? Blocked maybe is a better way to do it. And omnino means entirely, right? So the opening or the entrance of the cave might be, or was, you might even say, was entirely blocked. So it's a big boulder there, okay? And again, just a purpose clause to end here. So the story, Herc has found his oxen, okay? But now it's not done yet because he has to figure out how he's going to get into the cave because it's blocked, okay? So there's a lot going on in this story, in terms of the plot. He's looking for a cow, there's mooing, all these things. The grammar is nothing particularly new that we haven't seen so far in the Herc story. So hopefully you're feeling okay with it. There's some purpose clauses there, subjunctive, things like that. But a lot of it is repeating what we've seen. If you have any questions at all, though, put them in the comments below. I'm happy to help you out or explain anything further. Or if there's anything where you're not sure where I came up with my translation, let me know. If I was unclear, I'll help you out with it. But otherwise, keep reading it. And like I said, do that read and reread method. And eventually you should be able to hit a point where you understand what's going on. You can read this without needing a dictionary or a commentary or anything like that. Okay. And that's just from practice. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. Good luck with it.